Well, we just heard in our psalm this morning from the first psalm, happy are those whose delight is in the instruction of the Lord, and on his teaching they meditate day and night. Happy are they. And so we ask, okay, Lord, what is your teaching? What is your instruction? And this is what he says. Whoever comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even life itself, cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not pick up the cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. Also, none of you can become my disciple if you do not give up all your possessions. When's the last time you got the priorities speech? Everybody's heard it, one time or another. Now that we find ourselves at summer's end, at the beginning of another school year, the priorities speech is back in season full force. Right? How many people do we have here in this room who work in education in one of our schools? As a teacher, a helper, a custodian, all right, there you go, quite a few. These poor people have had to suffer through in-service days at the beginning of the school year already, many of them, in which they all got the priorities speech in one way or another, from superintendents or principals or department heads, right? That now that summer is over, everything else must take second place to what? To the educational and developmental needs of our students, right? Yep. Students have most certainly been on the receiving end of the priorities speech in these last days, right? Whether they heard it at before school orientations, or they heard it on the first day of school from one or more teachers, or probably definitely around the breakfast table before the first day of school, right? It went something like this, that everything else now must be subservient to their one job. They got one job of being a student. That means everything else is lower on the priorities list, including, but not limited to, after-school jobs, hanging out with friends, social media, sports, imagined romantic interests, video gaming, and must-see TV, right? Now, for some of us, the list looked a little bit different when we were in school, but really not much. The essence of it has remained the same. Priorities speech. Athletes have been on the receiving end of the priorities speech now in these days as athletic seasons have been ramping up. It's been 40 years this last week since my first season of a sport in high school. 40 years. What the heck? Where did that go? 40 years, but I can remember like it was yesterday, sitting out in the wet green grass outside Patrick Henry High School in North Minneapolis on the first day of cross-country practice. And our coach, Coach Craig Canham, gave us the priorities speech. And it went something to the effect of this. He said, cross-country is a work sport. You will get out of it exactly as much as you put in. If you do not want to work, you are in the wrong place. If the smell of sweat somehow turns you off, you can get up and leave. If you don't like pain, he said this, the idea of pain is abhorrent to you, and I had to look up the word abhorrent because I had no idea what he was talking about. If pain is abhorrent to you, he said, don't bother coming to gear checkout after this practice. He says, because we will work and we will sweat, and you will find out what the limits of your pain tolerance are. And in the process, he said, you will discover just how much you're capable of if you are willing to put this sport at the top of your priority list right behind faith, family, and schoolwork. Everything else, he said, it better be a distant fifth. Coach Craig Canham was kind of like North Minneapolis' answer to Vince Lombardi, who was the legendary coach of the Green Bay Packers, who was given to say to his players, gentlemen, we will be successful if you have your priorities in order. God, family, and the Green Bay Packers. And not necessarily in that order. That's what he would tell them. The priorities speech. Now, you don't have to be an instructor or a student or an athlete to have gotten that speech. If you've ever been hired for a job, you probably got that speech on your first day. Right? If you have ever been on the receiving end of a wedding sermon, then I know you've gotten the speech, right? Forsaking all others and cleaving to this one. If you've ever had a mom or a dad, I can pretty much guarantee you've heard it. Now, the question is, have you been obedient to those priorities? Have you been obedient to those priorities? See, some would argue that certain personality types are simply more obedient and subservient than others, and that dictates whether or not a person receives well or not the priorities speech. I say that's nonsense, because I think every person in this room this morning has exactly the same capability of being obedient, given the right circumstances. See, what dictates obedience is not one's level of fear or how compliant their personality might be, but rather how life-giving they perceive the thing to which they are offering their obedience. How life-giving. You see, a student becomes obedient to their studies, putting everything else down the order of priorities, when he or she perceives the good that comes from doing that. Whether the good they perceive is academic honors or better grades or a deeper understanding of the world, or maybe just getting out of study hall early, right? Somehow they see life in the pursuit of academics and learning. An athlete becomes obedient to their sport, putting other things way down the priorities list, subjecting their body to strict regimens, watching what they put in that body, getting the right amount of sleep, going all in during workouts and practices, studying playbooks, studying their competition, when they perceive the good that comes from doing what's in their power to do in order to be their best at that thing. They find life, you see, in the pursuit of athletic excellence. A person becomes obedient to another human being in a marriage relationship, forsaking all others and honoring those vows and promises, dedicating themselves to the needs of the other, as long as those needs don't include folding laundry. There are limits, right? But otherwise, all other things, being obedient in them. Why? They dedicate themselves to that one because that relationship pales in comparison to every other friendship, every other relationship, every other association, aside from this one for whom they sacrifice. It's not that they start despising every other man or woman once they speak their marriage vows. It's that they find life in the pursuit of sacrifice for this one whom they love, who loves them back. I happen to know someone who is slavishly devoted to the pursuit of wildlife, capturing it either with a camera or a bow, right? And there are lots of other things that this young man could be doing with his time, like maybe getting a job or cracking a book every once in a while. That'd be good too. But he is obedient to the demands of his avocation. Why? Because he finds life in the pursuit of beautiful things. Because he finds life there. As I was preaching that last paragraph this morning, and his mother was sitting right over here, I looked over expecting to see him, and I didn't. And you know why? Because he was up in the canyon taking pictures of wild critters, and I saw him sneaking in here during communion. A living example of exactly what I'm talking about, right? This is where he finds life, so I can't take that away from him. To what are you obedient? To what are you obedient? Chances are you are obedient to something, and chances are It is to something that you perceive gives you life, whether it's a person, a family, a community, a friendship, a career, a country, a worldview, a hobby, a lifestyle. There are plenty of things that would have our allegiance and to which we pledge our obedience, and a lot of them are very, very good things. Jesus invites us to the best. Large crowds were following after him, and he turned to them and said, "Whoever comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even life itself, cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not pick up a cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. None of you can become my disciple if you do not give up all your possessions." Now that is a priorities speech. In more hyperbolic terms than most bosses or coaches or teachers or parents would ever dare deliver. Heck, even preachers like me shy away from this one. It's just too much. It's just too raw. Despise all other relationships, forgo my own comfort and self-protection, my own life, pick up a cross. In other words, welcome the consequences of going against imperial authority? Really? Sacrifice the things that offer me security? Really? I don't know about you, but this is one priority speech I have a real hard time with. Following Jesus just ought to be easier, but it's not. And at least he's honest about it. The question is, in putting all things in subjection to him, is there life there for us? Because it sounds to our ears an awful lot like death, right? Is there life there for us? Because that is the only thing that could command our obedience. Are we able to perceive the good that comes from the obedience to which Jesus calls us? Well, here's the deal. Jesus' priorities are seldom ever easy or convenient, because the field on which Jesus plays is an arena absolutely full of need. Hungry people in need of feeding, sick people in need of healing, grieving people looking for solace, lonely people looking for a friend, a warring world looking for some peace, a dying world in need of resurrection. It is an arena full of crosses. And yet, at the same time, a promise of life. I spoke to you earlier in this message about my high school coach, Coach Craig Canham. And I know I've spoken to you before about my college coach, Coach Ken Finonger, who was kind of an institution down at Luther in Decorah, Iowa. For over 30 years, he coached the distance running program there. And he grew up in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, which made him an inveterate Packer fan as well, which I found out pretty much my first day of practice, because he channeled Vince Lombardi that day to us in his priorities speech. He said, "Gentlemen, we will be successful as a cross-country team as long as you have your priorities in order. And they are faith, family, your studies, and representing this school as a distance runner." And he did not say not necessarily in that order. He meant precisely in that order. See, on Sunday mornings at 8:30, we would gather together down at the field house. And I remember precisely that first Sunday morning run of my freshman year. We were gathering down there at 8:30 in the morning. He said, "I want you done and out of the field house, showered up by 11:15, because worship is at 11 o'clock up at the Center for Faith and Life." He didn't say you have to go. He just made it very clear that it was very available to us should we desire to, right? But I remember gathering down at that field house that Sunday morning in September at 8:30, and he told us the route we were going to run. We always ran between 11 and 15 miles on a Sunday morning. And he sent us off on this run, and then he kind of disappeared, which was weird because the whole week prior to that, my first week of actually running on that team, he was always there for every moment of that workout, whether he was driving alongside us in his Buick or we were doing laps around the IM field or workouts on the track. He was always standing there with his watch and his whistle. But on Sunday, he sent us off and he disappeared, and I asked one of the upperclassmen, where'd Coach go? And he said very matter-of-factly, oh, Coach teaches 5th grade Sunday school at Good Shepherd Lutheran Church. He'll meet us back at the field house when we're done. Priorities, you see. He taught me a lot more about priorities in his actions than he ever did with his words. You look at the long arc of your life, and you ask yourself, what do I really want? What gives me life? What do I want for myself and for my family? And ask it not because you should, but simply ask it because the abundant life and way of discipleship that Jesus both promises and announces takes sacrifice. And it demands obedience, not to earn God's grace, but rather so that you can take fully the abundant life that grace makes possible. This is not about our eternal destiny right now. Jesus has sewn that up for you on Calvary, right? No, this now, our obedience is about the character and the caliber of our witness as Christians. And like anything else worth doing, discipleship, witness, it takes time, it takes energy, it takes work, it takes practice. In a word, it takes everything. And it's worth it because it is the one thing that can give you life. Life itself. Amen.